Yay.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you for inviting us back to present. I'm Jane from Assemble. I've met some of you before, and Alice as well is here.
Hello.
Hi.
And so we have with us as well Neil Daffin from Ritchie Daffin
Hello. Hi.
Environmental Engineers, Greg Franklin from Stockdale, surveying, and Peter Laidler from Structural Workshop. And so they're going to also talk a little bit in regards to the schemes that we are proposing, but also here to answer any kind of questions that you might have. Shall I hit those slides? Or
Yeah.
so you teamwork already. So yeah, if you go to the next slide, sort of recap, same presentation as I handed out. So
This is Assemble on the right.
So this is an image of like the wider collective. There are about 60 of us at the moment on one of the structures that we signed 2 years ago. And so we proposed 2 options: one for just the community centre and one for the community centre and housing, in response to the brief and areas kind of outlined in that document that you gave us. And so really we used the opportunity to kind of test that brief and test certain parameters around it, such as it being an accessible building, trying to think through potential for self-build construction, and how we might also think about where the location of this building might be, and whether it's here, where the retainers currently are, or somewhere else. So in this example, we were really thinking about the entrance to the site and creating a clear street line through to the other housing in Sandford. We also have been thinking about the idea that community centre would be on this location, but that wouldn't preclude housing being also part of this proposal, and potentially sites towards the back of the site being used to develop a scheme. We felt that potentially the restrictions around those areas might be too difficult for us to work with a competition stage. So in a way, we're presenting to you 2 community centre and housing schemes rather than one. Al, do you have anything to add to that one?
But I guess also with both the schemes, we're quite interested in how, like, the new public front that might be created for Sandford, and how to address the sort of high street and the boundary, but also, questioning like whether to sort of like separate off the car parking from the sort of public from the garden space. But yeah, we were with both of them. We were interested in creating these new sort of like pocket gardens across the site. That is.
Yeah. So go to the next slide. So that was really the driving factor for this scheme, and you can see the image on the left. This idea that there's a really clear entrance where the car parking is retained in that same location, that there's a street front, there's a front door for the housing, but then this allows the part of the site directly in front of the mural to be an extension of the gardens that are running along the back, with the community centre positioned in a way that gives a view through this kind of big open front into Sandford. So also in both schemes, trying to retain a clear view of the mural from the approach on the kind of east side of the site. And we proposed a very slender building, or as slender as possible, for the housing in order to sort of maximise the outdoor space, but also combining these 2 buildings, the community centre with the housing, rather than trying to kind of fit 2 separate structures on the site. This allows them also to share the services, and allows more flexibility in terms of movement between the buildings and their future uses. Again, with this proposal as well, you could additionally develop those back areas of the site for even more housing, allowing then this building to become entirely for communal use. But that's a very long-term ambitious idea that we maybe sort of wanted to think through.
I guess also just that where you'll see in the plans on the boards, and which we've got as an appendix at the end of the presentation if you want to go over them, that the community hall is located in the middle of the plan to sort of frame the mural from the street, so to make the sort of like view through to the mural as like public as we should.
And so really the approach is a response to the scale of spaces outlined in the brief, and really trying to think about what the quality of these spaces might feel like. So kind of formally and in terms of location and the scale of the building, with our approach, there's quite a lot up for grabs in terms of positioning and size. And so what we really wanted to focus on for this presentation is the materiality, which we think is like a really exciting part of the scheme, not only in terms of creating a really interesting building, but something that also creates a series of opportunities for people at Stamford to get involved with in terms of fabricating the building itself. So it's a solid timber frame structure, potentially using some sort of hempcrete to create the wall build-up, and then clad with timber panels. We've got a kind of 1 to 10 mock-up that we made here, but we can talk through that. We're going to talk through that a little bit in another point in the presentation. So I'm just going to hand over.
So one
Oh, sorry.
on this. So yeah, but also just that I guess this is our like sort of first response to, because we also haven't had a chance to really talk to all of you guys very much about what like you really like to have in the community centre, and what are the sort of necessary spaces and where the housing is located, and just that to say that we've run through our first thoughts, but it'd be great just to develop it as to what seems right and with you guys further on, and but the part we have developed more is the construction method.
Yeah. So Neil, over to you.
Do you want to come over there? Or?
Yeah. Details so fun.
So I guess we want to kind of work with you to help create very comfortable and delightful spaces that kind of really limit the use of the energy in the building and the carbon emissions. And here's a kind of environmental diagram that we've put together. There's quite a lot going on here, but we think that the new building should be heated using heat pumps, either ground source or air source. Ground source, is more efficient, but a bit more expensive. We've shown a connection to the possible connection to the cell chip CHP if it ever kind of materialises. That would be great if that happens. And then we can use solar water heating to preheat hot water for the bathrooms in the housing. We can recycle water from the roof to flush toilets. So we can use all these kind of low-tech, low-energy systems in the building. But the real focus for us is on the building envelope, because that's where you can make the biggest difference in terms of kind of lowering your energy and carbon emissions, because the building envelope is kind of managing the flows of heat and light and air across the boundary. So if we can make the building envelope work a lot harder, we need less of this stuff, and it needs to run less often. So it's about looking back in the past, buildings that were kind of constructed before the introduction of electricity worked really well in terms of the architecture was kind of developed around maximising natural light and daylight. So it may not come across in this plan, but what we're really trying to do with these buildings is make them all, highly daylit, much more daylit than, say, this space. Maybe light coming from two directions, so you create an air path for air to flow through. So it's all kind of working naturally. And then maybe we go to the next slide. What's really important is the actual material that we construct the building from. And as Jane said, we're proposing hempcrete here, which is a kind of natural material of hemp and lime bonds kind of mixed together, and works really well. It's a good insulant, but it's also got a very high density and specific heat capacity. So compared to traditional conventional insulation material, it's got a lot of thermal mass. So what that means is that its response to the outside environment it kind of slows it all down. So in the summer, essentially, it acts a bit more like a cave, and there's a bigger delay in terms of the risk of overheating. So, and the other great thing about hempcrete is it's vapour permeable. So, with a conventional wall build-up, you know, we have lots of layers, breather membranes, vapour barriers, air gaps, to kind of make it all work and make vapour flow through without forming condensation in the middle. With hempcrete, you can just kind of put it down and it will work naturally on its own. The disadvantage of the kind of conventional build-up is that you add all these layers at different stages on a building site, and so there's a greater risk of things kind of failing and the thermal performance not being quite as you want it to be. So we're proposing hempcrete. It's a really great material in terms of building performance, but it does need to be slightly thicker than the conventional. So we think somewhere between 600. We could probably get away with 400, but 600 will give you the optimum to get a really kind of good thermal performance. Pete, do you want to say something about how it stands up?
Yeah, so from a structures point of view, we haven't really developed the structure of the proposal because there's an understanding that it's just that, a proposal, and to a certain extent it's a fluid design that will be developed in response to your needs. We've just shown a couple of the buildings that we've done in South London in the last few years that sort of demonstrate what can be done at low cost using natural materials. For this project, timber seems to almost be self-selecting, you know, for its low embodied energy, its carbon sequestering, and something that we're increasingly interested in, and I think could be applied to this project, is the notion of provenance of materials and delaminating materials. So, for example, if you were to build it out of solid timber, knowing where that timber comes from, even to the point of perhaps selecting a standard Douglas fir in the southern counties and saying, let's build our building from this, you know, sort of having a direct relationship to the building, to the materials that you're using. That's sort of more and more important to us, I think. The next slide sort of just speaks of, as engineers, we're really, Structure Workshop, we're really interested in the clear expression of structure and materials, and we feel that, you know, robust detailing in a timber building is really important to protect it from weather, you know, the plinth, the overhangs, to make the building durable, but also, you know, focusing on, say, the connection design to sort of to contribute to the beauty of the building and the quality of the building and the sort of tactile quality of the building. We really believe that that sort of input from the structural engineer can contribute to the architecture. This is in Waterloo. It's a farm building that we designed with Firth and Fowles. And the last slide is a building in Greenwich, just down the road, that does use hempcrete, that we designed with Practice a few years ago. This is a self-build project, and I think that's something that we're also interested in exploring in terms of your brief, as to what extent you might be interested in self-build. And I think in a timber building, one of the other advantages is that you could get involved on a macro scale, you know, in terms of the carpentry, the frame, or on a smaller scale in terms of the fit out, or even on a very sort of light scale in terms of the cabinetry or the staining or the. So there's a whole range of ways that you might be able to engage.
And yeah, just I guess that about to follow on from the self-build aspects of it is that that's something that we as Assemble are really interested in and have quite a lot of experience in working on. About sort of how much of it is, how much of it we build with you, as Pete was saying, whether it's from the structure through to the cladding. So we've sort of designed something that can be, like, sort of, could all be entirely self-build. We have quite a lot of experience of working on, like, a sort of self-build cladding system. So this project on the left is an old studio building where we are based in Sugar House, where I think we're passing around some of the tiles,
Pink tiles
from where they're all made. And we also built the timber frame structure for that building. And then there's the Hammercats Brewery, which is also a timber frame building, which we worked with Pete on, where we stained all of the panels and the timber frame cladding for that. and then also Goldsmiths contemporary Centre for Contemporary Art just around the corner, where we took out that a lot of that was built by a contractor, but we actually took out certain packages and delivered the facade ourselves. And then there's a small Seven Sisters tube station art on the underground project at the end, where we made all the tiles for that. But so I think we have a well, this is also something that we are able to offer, I guess, as part of the package, is that we actually own a construction company, so we could deliver like all of the building with you guys if you wanted, or it could just be like elements of the cladding.
But even right down to the scale of the door knobs in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So I think what we wanted to really propose is something where there's lots of opportunity for different scales. And if you go to the next slide, this is our studio. So you can see that we have had experience in delivering the kind of structural frame of buildings. So it's something also that if it wasn't part of the self-build element from your side, it could be the self-build element from our side, and we have quite a lot of flexibility to mitigate risk in that respect. We're able to deliver things that potentially are maybe harder for the community to do, but then also offer opportunities to kind of experiment and make stuff on this kind of scale if that was maybe more an easier expectation. But we wanted to create an approach where that was really something that you can decide and think about to maximise that opportunity.
So yeah, so these are our studios based there, about a 10-minute cycle ride away from here, just in Bermondsey, called Sugar House. We manage these where we work from there. We also have about sort of 40 or so tenants of like skilled makers, so ranging from carpenters to some artists and ceramicists. So I guess in a way we'd be quite interested in how we might be able to work with potentially you guys and potentially quite a lot of them as well. There could be some training opportunities as well as part of the delivery. Yeah, and so just to say again, it could really range from the structure to, this was our first project which we built ourselves with about 100 or so volunteers. It was a temporary project, but
and also I suppose what was interesting about this one is that everything that was fabricated for the project was made on the site itself, and our proposals, which I think is just really on the boards, speaks to the way in which we expect potentially you would retain the container during the entire construction process, in part because you still need a space to meet during the kind of the build, which will be potentially quite a long period. But also be able to start fabricating things from the building in phases, like out of the container. And so we've kind of had quite a lot of experience, like managing the logistics of people and things and materials, and thinking about deliveries and sequencing. It's quite complex, we've got quite a lot of good and bad experience of managing that.
I think also probably. Jane, if you want to just hold. Well, we've got a section of the proposed wall construction method for here, and basically, as we were saying, it's like so this is at 1 to 10, but basically it's a timber frame structure with hempcrete, very thick hempcrete wall, but then clad in. Basically, these are all panels that can be made by 1 or 2 people on the ground. So they're just a regular plywood sheet made sort of with effectively timber boarding, stained timber boarding on the outside. So it's designed so that a couple of people could make a panel that then could be assembled onto the building. And
Greg, these are a few words on.
Yeah. Would you like me to?
Yeah.
Right, so how do we go about thinking about the construction cost at a stage when we've only got a brief from you, which is a few pages long, and an outline design? So what we tend to do in order to get a handle on what the project might cost is to just look at what square meterage of building is going to ultimately come out of your brief in approximate terms. how many units you're building, roughly what the community space size should be. And then we think about the budget that you set in the brief, and we just work out how much you've got to spend per square metre of floor area. It's as simple as that. We think about that in relation to projects that we've built and projects that we know about that have been built by others. And that tells us that if we take this scheme and design it and procure it in what might be regarded as a conventional way, putting it out, if you like, into the jaws of the competitive marketplace of construction, then I think that that budget will be a challenge and it will be difficult to achieve everything that you have in there. But if we come at it more laterally, in some of the ways that have been described already, if we think much harder about challenging the way that things are typically procured, so if we can make some of your materials in-house, things like the hempcrete, which have been mentioned, which is low skill to make and low skill to install, but does a multiple set of functions within the building, then we can start to bring the costs down. Any kind of volunteer labour or self-building elements will give you an advantage over clients who can simply just trust the marketplace out there to give you the best deal that they can. So I think that you need to be considering those sort of approaches to get everything that you want. And I think that what Peter, Neil and Assemble have described are ways where this team can help you achieve that.
So we've included a series of the plans and a bit more that Neil provided us in an appendices that's printed at the back of this, and there's a bit of sort of outline